Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we uncover the leadership life hacks that help you to experience breakout performance faster and rocket to success. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because we have somebody on the show today who's really going to help us make an impact on something that's vitally important, and quite frankly, it has been for a long time, but we absolutely need to focus more on now because jobs are getting more complex. Julie Winkle Giulioni is a development evangelist who's passionate about ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to learn and grow to their potential so that they can fully engage in work and life. She's been deeply involved in learning from her first teenage job, teaching, modeling, and charm to children. She was a high school vocational educational teacher that parlayed that into becoming the department chair and professor of fashion marketing at Woodbury University in Southern California. Julie really wanted to return to industry, so she pivoted from education to learning and development when she took on a corporate role at Carter, Hewley, Hale, and then Alexander and Alexander, now Aon. When she was recruited to one of her own vendors, Zenger Miller, Julie had the opportunity to cut her consulting teeth and lead the ins and outs of commercial training development. Her final corporate role was Director of Product Development for Achieve Global, which was at the time the largest training company. That was 20 years ago. Today, she has her own consulting firm focused on, of course, helping people and employees and leaders and organizations to grow. 8 years ago, Julie accomplished the long-held goal and wrote her first book, which became a bestseller. Help Them Grow and Watch Them Go, Career Conversations Organizations Need and Employees Want. And it's now in its second edition. And I'm sure because of all the things that we've had with COVID, there's probably a third edition coming quickly. And she's finalizing a contract on her next book, which will be coming out next year. When she's not working with clients, writing, or speaking, Julie enjoys stand-up paddleboarding, yoga, and a variety of philanthropic activities. And she has 2 grown children, as well as a grown dog and a husband in South Pasadena, California. Julie Winkle Giulioni, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
I am so ready.
I'm glad you're here. Now, I've given my Legion a little bit about you, but can you share what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Yeah, it really does boil down to helping people grow. The business that I'm in right now offers consulting and training. I do a lot of speaking on the topic and working with organizations to really isolate where the gaps are and how we can lift folks up to be able to reach their potential, contribute more, and support organizational objectives in the process.
Well, and one of the things that I think is critically important, and you talk about debunking it in the book, is how career development has traditionally occurred, how it's structured, how it's executed. And you talk about it being a separate event, which it should not be. And you talk about it integrating within the work. What do you really mean by that?
Right. Well, and, it's all as a result of very well-meaning intentions. But, over the years, what was found was folks just weren't getting the career development attention that they needed. And we know that it links directly to engagement and discretionary effort and all sorts of business results. So it's in the organization's best interest to make sure that folks are being developed, and yet for a variety of reasons that just wasn't happening. And so many organizations found that the way forward was to programatize it, to put together processes and systems and paperwork and deadlines. And again, well-meaning to make sure that every employee, at least once a year, got to sit down and have a conversation about their growth. Problem is, as soon as we programatize things, then when a leader goes through that program, if you will, they get to check the box and they're done with it. And so I've talked to so many leaders, asking the question, why do you think you're not able to deliver the career development people want? And they're like, wow, what are you talking about? I met the deadline. I filled every cell on that form. I did the career development. Thank you very much. And yet, as I talk with folks around the world, not one person has told me that they got to where they are in life and they grew significantly because a boss filled out the form well. It's something different. And so we need to help leaders figure that out.
Well, even that you say that, I mean, for me, I start thinking about really the folks who can actually say or respond to that question. I would dare to say they've gone outside of the system in order to gain their development.
Yeah,
Would that be true?
in many cases, yeah. Or outside of the system or organically within the system. And that's really the shift that organizations are beginning to embrace. And now with such a remote workforce as well, it's got to be a much more organic rather than programmatic sort of approach to the growth that folks need.
Well, I mean, I can tell you what you just said right there is so vital to, I think, quite frankly, all organizations today. Because even they're talking about it as we sit here right now and we're recording this, we're still in the midst of this pandemic and the recovery from it. And I tell everybody we're on a 10-year recovery process. I mean, it's going to, and so if you or even think about the people who are going to go back to a physical place of work, that number is going to be, I think, quite shocking for a lot of folks. And so the remote workforce, telework, congratulations to some of those people who are still going to, commute in those big cities like LA and Atlanta and all that. Your commute may have just gotten shorter.
True.
But the career development paths have changed, and remote workers talking about that distancing. I'm no longer over your shoulder. I'm not getting some of that organic learning, because I'm having to talk to people at a break or anything like that. So a lot of that opportunity starts to decline. So the intentionality of developing remote staff has become more vitally important, and this whole integration within the work has to happen. So what do companies do?
Yeah, that's so true. In fact, intention was exactly the word that was coming to my mind as you were speaking. Here's an interesting point. I did some research as the pandemic began. And what we found was that 75% of employees who responded reported that they had as much time or more time than they did before this crisis for development. And so here's the first thing that we need to acknowledge is that people have an appetite for it and they can find the time to make it happen now. And so organizations have, a really ripe opportunity to strike and to offer, again, the support that people need in order to move forward versus, not necessarily programs that make that happen. And so what I'm talking about is really enabling leaders at all levels of the organization to have the kinds of conversations, the candid conversations that are necessary with employees to figure out where they are, what they love, what they want to do, and see how that fits into the future trajectory. Because career development is only sustainable when it serves both the employee and the organization. And so finding the intersection between where I want to go, what I want to do, and what the organization needs is a sweet spot where development can really happen and serve both.
Well, and for me, talking about those impacts and effects, I also think about it from that whole customer impact perspective. I mean, when you start talking about, the types of solutions, products, and all of that people are selling, and the complexities of the marketplace, and the access to information, often false information, by customers. I mean, interactions are becoming more difficult. So that whole development piece is becoming more critical. And you talk about 5 myths that are currently in place in regards to, immobilizing people from making these advances. And these are, I guess, things that we really need to look at eradicating or minimizing as much as possible. And these 5 are simply not enough time. If I don't talk about it, they may not think about it. And then, the status quo is safe. Since employees the employees need to own their own careers. It's not my job. Everyone, that it needs to be bigger, better, promotion, raises prestige, power, and that's just not the case. Development efforts are best concentrated on high potentials, or hypos, and many of them already have plans in place. So when you start talking about these immobilizing myths, what do we need to do in order to make things change?
Well, and thanks for asking, because I think this is really the crux of the matter. When we wrote the book and saw the incredible business case associated with development, we really had to ask ourselves, why isn't it happening? Because it looks like a no-brainer from the outside. And so as we started interviewing and doing surveys with managers, we were looking for, excuses, reasons, those sorts of things. And the more we talked to folks, the more we found that what was getting in the way was, and that's why we called it an immobilizing myth. And, myth has kind of a kernel of something that got it started, but then it grows out of control. But it doesn't matter, because it was immobilizing leaders from doing the work that they needed to do. And so, so the first thing is to debunk these myths, to really help leaders see, for instance, the myth that everybody's expecting that bigger and better, the promotion, the raise, the corner office. Truth is, only about 25% of the population here in the United States is looking for that next leap. What employees told us they wanted more than anything else out of a career conversation with their boss was creative ways to use their skills and talents. And if we can help leaders understand that that's really what folks are looking for, ways to step up in new directions, new skills to be able to bring to bear, new passions to be able to pursue. If we can help leaders understand that, then suddenly career development doesn't seem so daunting. If we can recast what career development looks from a cadence standpoint, right now it's like an hour or 2 hours once a year where you've got to go through all this paperwork. It's daunting, particularly if you've got a huge span of control and you're trying to do it in a 1 week period. If we can redefine what career development conversations look like and parse them out and maybe make it 10 minutes a month, or 5 minutes a week, or a moment every day that we can build and layer this joint understanding upon, again, that myth starts to dissipate and disappear.
So as you're talking, I'm even thinking about just this overall, request and requirement. You talk about, 25% of people only are interested in going up to that next rung of rung in the ladder of responsibility. But that doesn't to say that they don't want to be developed. I mean, and I think that those are two separate things, right?
Bingo.
So more and more people are saying, I want to be developed, and it's not happening.
It's absolutely true. And the problem that we've had traditionally, back in the cradle to grave sort of scenario around employment, where you had kind of one job that took you through your whole life and career, is we had this vision, this model, this imagery of the corporate ladder. And success is about moving up that corporate ladder. And yet the ladder has been rickety and has fallen down and hasn't worked for years. When you look at the downsizing, the right sizing, the boomers not only living longer, but having the audacity to work longer and occupy spaces younger folks wanted. The nature of work, kind of the organic nature, the way we organize ourselves, and the gig economy. I mean, all of this has totally toppled the ladder. And yet, when people think about career development, that's our default thinking. And so that's one of the biggest shifts that we have the opportunity to make with leaders and employees alike, is to stop thinking of it as a ladder, stop thinking about career development as going someplace, as being something different than you are now, and instead to think in terms of doing, and how can we do differently? What could we invite into the envelope of our current role that keeps us fresh and engaged and learning and challenged? And that then becomes a very doable sort of scenario for leaders, organizations, and the employee.
Well, but are we possibly talking out of both sides of our mouth when, you talk about, okay, development's not happening, needs to happening, but then yet less is more. So what do you mean by less is more?
Yeah. So that was really kind of a provocative comment on our part, because organizations have layered more and more and more. As we talked about, the processes, the systems, the paperwork, the deadlines, all of that. And so it's been built up in the minds of leaders that this is a big deal. this high stakes. It's got to be like Christmas, birthday, Hanukkah, all rolled into one. Because if we're only doing one conversation a year, the expectations on the part of employees are pretty great. So the idea of less being more is we can move the needle when it comes to development more effectively by parsing development conversations out. By rather than doing it a kind of a one and done cadence, to have those small conversations over time, to check in with people about how they're doing, what they're interested in, what they're loving about the work that they're doing, maybe what they're not. To have those conversations about where the organization is going, what's happening in our industry, what are the innovations, as you were talking about earlier, the innovations that are going to be required to keep us relevant over the long haul. And then finding the intersection in small ways that people can start kind of taking a bite out of this elephant, that we think of as career development. So the idea of less is more is really just making it more doable, unbundling it from some of the bigger process work to make it the human endeavor that it is.
Well, and I think one of the things that you mentioned is critically important because you talk about, the questioning and the inquiry and all of that and part of that discovery process. And you mentioned an important element that's essential to all of this. And you refer to the curiosity quotient. What is, and you call it CQ. What is CQ?
Yeah. So CQ is exactly that, curiosity quotient. So we have, emotional intelligence, we have IQ. But one of the things that really moves the needle with leaders in general, and certainly when it comes to the development of their staff, is the gift and the infusion of curiosity. So frequently leaders are on a fast track. They've got to get things done. They've got to do it fast. They've got more work to accomplish in a day than is humanly possible. And that's a recipe for baking curiosity out of our relationships and our conversations. And so really helping people grow means bringing a curious mind to each of our interactions. It means recognizing that the people who are walking through the door today are a little bit different than they were yesterday. And the curiosity associated with learning about them, with not pigeonholing folks, which again is so efficient, and yet it absolutely undermines our ability to help them grow. Curiosity to stay abreast of what's going on even, in our industry and beyond, because it's not just about what people want to do and how they want to grow. It's got to be relevant for the organization and the industry. It's got to be moving us forward. So curiosity about what's next in terms of our products and our services and the trajectory that's going to go. So really being inquisitive, bringing those questions, not having your mind made up already, and starting conversations with a bit of a fresh, clean slate helps to make sure that we're surfacing the information that's needed to be able to help people grow in a relevant fashion.
Well, and along the lines with the whole curiosity thing, you talk about looking back to move forward. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So the centerpiece of our book is really a conversational model that involves hindsight, foresight, and insight. Hindsight is what we typically think of when we think about having a career conversation. It's about helping people look back at what they've done, where they've been, how they've contributed, what they love, what they are interested in doing, maybe what they're not so interested in doing, their values, that whole, kind of repository of information about who that person is. And so that's kind of the backward look. And we need that to then be able to cross-reference it with that forward look of the foresight. What are the needs of the organization? Where are we going strategically? But even bigger than that, sort of the big picture stuff. What's going on in our world demographically, economically, geopolitically, environmentally, that creates kind of the guardrails or defines the sandbox within which relevant career development is happening. I recently read a statistic from the Institute for the Future of Work. 85% of the jobs we're going to be doing in the year 2030 haven't yet been invented. And so we need to look backward and inward at where folks are coming from, but we got to look forward as well and balance that and start looking around the corner. So we're preparing folks to be relevant contributors when that time comes.
Well, I think that also aligns with what you were referring to, using my existing skills creatively with where I am.
Yeah, exactly. And mining that native intelligence and genius that we've got, but doing it increasingly in different expanded ways that keep us on the leading, not the bleeding edge going forward.
Well, another thing that you mentioned that's kind of fouled up is feedback in this whole development process. And I think what's often missed is really what it takes in order to be able to properly receive the feedback. And we don't do a whole lot of development in that area for folks, so they don't use it in a way that's constructive and beneficial. We always focus in on the projector or the one who's, giving it. But you say it's as simple as ABC in order to be a better, listener and an effective, partner in this whole feedback process. What is ABC?
Yeah. And just to kind of lay the foundation for that, one of the problems that we've found, another kind of myth, if you will, is that so frequently leaders think that they're the ones who have to be the feedback sharers. They're the ones who have to gather the information, analyze it, communicate it. And so, as we talk about less is more, another strategy is to realize that as a leader, you're just seeing one drop in the ocean of someone's performance and behavior. And so what we really do is to encourage leaders to distribute this responsibility, to teach individual employees how to go out and gather their own feedback. We know, first of all, that when you ask for feedback, rather than having it foisted upon you, it's much easier to listen, to integrate, and to use. But also, the employees know who has greater visibility to their performance, their work, their strengths, their opportunities, and that kind of thing. And so, as leaders, the shift can be, let's teach employees how to go take responsibility for their own feedback gathering. And yet most employees, as you said, they've never learned how to do this. And so the default way to approach it would be to go out and say, hey, how am I doing? And a coworker is going to go, oh, great, and everything's good. And so the quality of feedback really boils down to the quality of the questions that we're asking. And so ABC relates to the kinds of questions and the focus of these conversations. So going out to folks and asking, what are my abilities? What am I good at? What can you always count on me for? What do I deliver on time and again? The B is for blind spots. And so that's a tough one, but asking, where do you notice I fall down consistently? What do I do when I'm under stress? Because that can frequently be something that gets in our way. And then finally, conditions. Under what kinds of conditions do you see me thriving? And where do you see me struggling more? When we start asking those kinds of questions of those around us, whether they be coworkers, employees, customers, suppliers, consultants, the folks who really have visibility to the work that we're doing, that's when we get some really meaningful feedback that can be integrated into our thinking and ultimately into our developmental strategies.
Well, and I'm talking about the ultimately, you mentioned that we have to create a development culture. And so we talk about all kinds of customer-centric culture. We talk about all these different types of cultures we have to build. But really, what do you mean by having a development culture?
Well, we can't understate the importance of an employee who's really owning and committed to their development, and a leader who's willing to engage and support those efforts. That partnership is powerful, and that alone can move mountains in terms of development. But when the culture comes in and conspires along with that, that's when you can really see significant shifts in an organization in terms of satisfaction, engagement, effort, and results. And so as we looked at the cultures that were supporting the kind of development we're talking about here, it became clear that there were some qualities, some characteristics that sort of ran through all of them. One, for instance, is they're blurry around the boundaries. Organizations that have really clearly defined silos, and it's us and them, and we do this and they do that, and there's a wall in between. Those organizations struggle a little bit with this kind of more organic development. The organizations where it's blurry, where there's a little gray area, where leaders in different departments might be able to share resources, crossover, where if one of my colleagues in another department has an opportunity that could be developmental for my folks, we could actually collaborate on that and exchange some resources. That kind of blurriness offers more visibility to the opportunities throughout the organization and more tangible opportunities to expand development. We don't have just our little narrow corridor. Another quality that we found was having a real passion for results. And again, what leader doesn't say, I'm passionate about results, I'm all about the results. And yet when you see how they get there, it's a very micromanagey way of achieving that. When a leader can be passionate about the results, the what of where we're going, but the how can be a little bit more amorphous and loose, that gives people an opportunity to step in, to experiment, to try new things, to stretch themselves and experience different skills and opportunities in a way that leads to the goal, the end result. But we've got room to maneuver around that. So there are some qualities that can build that kind of culture. And what I would suggest, Jim, is that when we develop this kind of a developmental culture, it actually supports all of the other cultures we talk about being important as well. When we are developing people, that supports a customer-centric environment as well. There's a direct connection between employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction. And so that kind of commitment to building that developmental culture really supports everything else that's important to an organization today.
Well, okay. So we start looking at all these contributing factors associated with, retention of employees, engagement of employees, morale associated with employees, how that pass-through happens when you start talking about, them being engaged and customers being engaged. But when you start thinking of degrees and levels of impact, right? I'm all about the numbers. How much does this issue play into those factors? I mean, are we talking most significant, somewhat? Where does it fall?
Well, I'm sure you're not going to be surprised for me to say most significant. Over the years, what I've really come to look at career development as is almost a leader's Swiss Army knife, because of all the tools and all of the metrics, frankly, that it affects. So we know that career development is one of the top 3 drivers of engagement. We know that engagement drives that discretionary effort, people's willingness to give more time, energy, creativity, innovation to the enterprise. That discretionary effort translates into all of the things that matter to organizations, whether it's quality, innovation, customer service, safety, retention. You had mentioned that earlier. The research from the Corporate Leadership Council found that leaders who engage in career development with their folks, they enjoy 40% greater retention. That's a significant number. That same research found that leaders who engaged in career development also saw 25% greater productivity from their employees. And Josh Burson has found that organizations with effective talent management systems see 26% greater sales per employee. So, career development used to be one of those nice to do's, and I would argue today it is a vital must do, given the way it does impact so much of what's important, essential to organizations.
Well, even like you're talking about, we have to look at our connectors and the way that we are tethering, in a positive way, those employees, because like I said, if more and more of us are becoming remote, the power of proximity is now lost. And it's the power of proximity that often retains people. So now it's just easier for me to shift from, essentially one URL to another URL, because I start losing that whole organizational identity and all these people that are involved with it. So I would dare to say what we're going to see over the course of the next couple of years is this particular issue becoming even more significant.
Agreed. The corollary, though, that I think is worth considering is that as we move more remotely, as center-led or, corporate headquarters become less the locus of focus, I think we're going to see more of a democratization. I totally messed up that word, but becoming more democratic. This notion of development and learning. And the notion of growth as well, because, you think about it, over the last decades, it's been those folks who were in the corporate office, or in the sales office, who were there on site, who had the visibility, who got to move up through the organization. And now, as we're all the same size tile on a screen, in many cases, I think we're going to see an evening of the playing field and maybe offer more development and opportunity across the board to folks if we're smart about how we do it.
That's a great point. Hopefully, we won't have other immobilizing myths, start to be developed as a result of all this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you start thinking about all of this, and for many of us, the whole development piece becomes quite personal. It becomes personal from our own. It becomes personal from the connections and relationships that we have with others. And, some will engage in their own development, others won't. But I think, that's yet another issue and probably another book. But we need to really stay focused and have inspiration around all of this. And one of the ways that we do that on the show is to focus on quotes. But is there a quote or two that you like that you can share?
Oh, gosh. I'm going to foul it up almost as badly as democratization. The essence of it is that we teach through the life that we learn. Others learn from the life that we lead and the behavior that we demonstrate. I'm so struck, this notion of leading by example. As a parent, I know that do as I say, not as I do, just has never played well. And it doesn't offer much in the workplace either. And so the idea of, authentically showing up and knowing that folks are going to follow your example rather than your words, really powerful.
That's a good point. Well, when I start also thinking about all of this, we have these mobilizing myths. We have, changes in marketplace. We have, crisis occurs, democratization.
Well done.
Just to make me say aluminum, right? But there's a lot of times where we've had, those learning moments, and we call those humps, and we can learn from others and the times where they've had to get over those humps. Is there a time where you've gotten over the hump that you can share?
Oh man, how long do you have? I don't have anything, Jem. Can you edit this out? Nothing's coming to mind.
No, we're going to actually work through it and we're going to keep it. Okay. So those times where you've had, that was a lesson learned. We've all had them. Throughout our lives, right?
The one that immediately comes to mind is, I was back in my 20s and I took a role that looked so prestigious. I thought I was going to be just the bee's knees as a result of this title more than anything, and stepped into the role. And by the end of the first week, I knew I had made a dreadful mistake. All of my instincts just told me to run for the door, and I didn't. At the time, I decided that I needed to make a 1-year commitment, and that I was going to make the best of that situation. And so while it didn't turn out the way I had expected, and it didn't send me down the career trajectory that I had dreamt of, what I did do was mine that experience, and it was a tough one. It was a really rough environment, not very empowering. I felt totally squashed down, but I decided each day to look for where the learning was. Where could I try one new thing? Where could I exercise one new skill, or just get a little better at this, or make a connection? And so it got me through the year. It was probably the richest growth experience that I've had in terms of just knowing the grit that I had and my ability to get through it and make the best of it. And at that 1 year anniversary, I got the heck out of Dodge.
Well, good thing for the stick-to-itiveness, right? And flipping that. Well, but when I think about, some of the work that you're doing now, how the whole workplace development, conundrum, has shifted, all of these things that are occurring, you've had downsizing, you've had a lot of organizations are flourishing, quite frankly, in this, situation. They have a whole different set of issues when it comes to development. You talk about, writing another book, the work overall that you're doing. I would dare to say that you probably have several goals, but is there one of those that you can share with us?
Yeah, in short term, I think my focus and a goal is really to help employees reframe the current experience that they're finding themselves in, and find a way to mine it for the learning and the growth that's available. Folks are struggling. I don't need to tell you and anyone listening that it's a tough time, and it's easy to feel a little bit beaten down and numb as we go through these days that feel so much like the last one. And yet the other side of it is this is a powerful opportunity for individuals to really look within, to figure out what they're bringing to the party and how they can amp that up in service of themselves and the organization. And for them to also look around at the rich opportunities that exist in the business landscape and in the workplace to be able to step up. So one of the areas I'm really focusing in on is how can we use this time productively to advance, our contributions and our growth in the process.
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. An Even Better Place to Work is an easy-to-use solution that gives you a continuous diagnostic on employee engagement along with integrated activities that will improve employee engagement and leadership skills in everyone. Using this award-winning solution is guaranteed to create motivated, productive, and loyal employees who have great work relationships with their colleagues and your customers. To learn more about An Even Better Place to Work, visit beyondmorale.com/better. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Julie, the Hump Day Hoedown is the part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Julie Winkle Giulioni, are you ready to hoe down?
I am so ready.
All right. So what is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
Ooh, critical, judgmental little voice in the back of my head.
And what is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
Be yourself.
And what would be one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
Kindness and lifting others up is the number one priority.
And what would be one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
Mindfulness.
And what would be one book you'd recommend to our legion? It could be from any genre. Of course, we're going to put a link to help them grow and go on your show notes.
The Power of Full Engagement.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Julie Winkle Giulioni. Okay, Julie, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you've been given that opportunity to go back to the age of 25 and you can take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you, but you can't take it all. You can only take one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you and why?
Failure isn't fatal. It's okay to make a mistake, to roll around in it, to really foul things up sometimes, as long as you learn from it and advance in the process.
Julie, I had fun with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
You bet. And I had a blast. Thank you so much, Jim. I can be reached at my website, winklegiulioni.com. And there are lots of resources and articles and videos and that kind of thing there. I'd love to connect with your listeners.
Julie Winkle Giulioni, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.